Well, speaking of getting out of the spot and putting someone else on the spot, I understand that Dana White has made some comments lately, and that you have an excerpt of some of those comments that may be applicable to the overall scheme of things of where the UFC crosses over and meets the WWE.
Yeah, a ton of listeners have sent this over, and it was making the rounds on social media. I think Vince McMahon was trending because of it, or just Vince was trending because of it. Here's Dana White at a press conference of some magnitude, answering a question about a fighter and specifically making WWE appearances. Again, UFC and WWE are now one, or it's a union. They have
it's a union formed in holy financial circles.
So let's go to this. Dana White.
We were talking to Derek Lewis this week, and he had mentioned that he might have been in talks with WWE as well, just to check them out. In the past, there'd been some wrestlers like Bobby Lashley and Jake Hager that went back and forth between wrestling and fighting in MMA.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a possibility for like some UFC guys to go to like a pay-per-view and make appearances or compete or anything like that?
Well, I didn't know that, but yeah, I would do anything for Derek Lewis. I really like Derek Lewis a lot. So, and listen, some of the fighters who fight here, you know, have always dreamed about doing a WWE match or whatever it is. And yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I didn't have a problem with that when Vince was consistently fucking me for no reason. And, now that that's not the case anymore,
there are lawsuits over that thing. Maybe you want to rephrase that. Vince was consistently fucking me for no reason.
I was about to say that, yeah, maybe he should have toned down that statement a little bit, but at least he doesn't appear to be traumatized by it.
Obviously would absolutely do it.
Could we ever see you as like a special guest referee one day?
Me? Yeah, that I guarantee you will not. No, never.
Well, he still hates wrestling, but now part of the same family. What do you think of the comments?
Well, yeah, and honestly, the story has been told that Vince did fuck him on a couple of occasions, and he's taken it to heart in terms of keeping him off television when Vince had the exclusivity or the right to refuse, waiving that, whatever the case. But
well, Vince did the one thing to help them, which was he gave the network the okay to let them do the Ultimate Fighter. And then that took off, and then there were problems, after that.
And then he said, I'm not going to make that mistake again, because Vince had no idea at that time. We had tried to tell him he didn't give a shit about MMA in general. The UFC he looked at as they got big enough to be not competition, but comparable. But when we had Shamrock and Severn and blah, 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 he didn't want to hear it. Shane tried. He didn't want to hear it. But the thing is, Dana White has always tried to also, you can tell publicly, separate what they do from pro wrestling as much as possible, because he didn't want people to think that the UFC was a work. And some people did, or at one times thought that, just because of, why wouldn't it be? But and all the boys at one time when the UFC was first getting, it's a work. Yeah, man. I'm not saying there's never been a gentleman's agreement in between two people. And Kurt Angle told me when he was in TNA that he talked to Brock and said, hey, if we get the chance, you could have one, I could have one, and then fucking we'll flip a coin on the winner or whatever. But Dana White didn't want people to think that UFC was predetermined, to the point where they discouraged the promos and the trash talking for most of the guys, the top guys that could pull it off, that didn't get hokey with it, that you could believe, the Chael Sonnens, the Conor McGregors, boom. Let them go out and draw money, but he kept a better, tighter grip on his business than wrestling did, at just coming out and just letting everybody do every goddamn thing. But now, even though he doesn't, I don't think he likes the wrestling business or wants to be involved in it, obviously, but he recognizes that not only are they under the same ownership, but he can potentially either get possibly guys from wrestling. Gable Stevenson just flunked out. Apparently, they couldn't make a pro wrestler out of him, but he's the greatest amateur wrestler in the country. Would that be an avenue? Go to the UFC. And he also knows that he can get some of his fighters huge fucking payoffs within the same company for doing, something they probably want to do anyway, a lot of them. So he's begrudgingly having to say those things. Probably not, full-throated endorsement, but he recognizes reality.
In terms of the relationship with the UFC and WWE in the Vince era, they were the two major players left for pay-per-view. And, In Demand just announced they're shutting down at the end of 2025. And thank God, what a bullshit company that is. As someone who worked in pay-per-view at one point, what a bullshit. It's a company owned by the cable companies, set up to be an intermediary you have to work with to get access. And then they get 10%, let's say, which is going to the people that are taking 50% already. So It's ridiculous. Goodbye In Demand. But it says something about the major players. And now look at the state of pay-per-view and the state of streaming. It's a different animal. I know a lot of people jumped on Dave Meltzer last week because he said, I guess factually, that the last WWE pay-per-view, Backlash, was like the least amount of buys for any pay-per-view ever for WWE.
Well, yeah, because I'm the only one.
Yeah, it's a different animal now. So, it's a factual statement. It's just comparing it to any sort of tangible metric because of the changing business models is ridiculous.
It is the lowest selling WWE pay-per-view means nothing when they're not hardly even trying to sell pay-per-views anymore because it's all streaming. And like I said, I'm the only one because I want it on real goddamn television with a remote control that works the way I like it. But otherwise, how many streamings are they doing? They're doing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of the streamings. So if you're selling a product and 10% of it or 5% or 2% is one place, but 98% is the other place, don't you kind of total up all the ways that you're selling it somehow?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, too, with the Netflix deal when that goes into effect, the fact that they're still on Peacock, because they are competitors competing for now live entertainment. Netflix has live stuff. They had a Cat Williams comedy special last week that was great. They had the roast of Tom Brady. They're getting into live events on these platforms, and WWE is going to be on 2 of them. At a time where everything is now getting consolidated again. It's like that Jim Gaffigan joke is coming true.
Yeah.
It's coming true. Why don't we just bundle all these streaming services together and we'll call it cable? It's not going to be on TV. It's not going to be cable like that. It'll be streaming. But everything's going to be bundled together. They're about to do Disney Plus, Hulu, and Max.
Where is the WWE Network historic content going to end up being available to people, or will it?
And their premium live events. Again, they're on Peacock right now, and the archive's on Peacock. Netflix is getting live Raw. At what point is Netflix going to say we want a premium live event?
I'm just worried that they've got the entire goddamn history practically of, as we've mentioned before, the entire history of wrestling that's still on tape. 90% of it is in their mountain somewhere. And, it is some point in the near future coming where you got to fucking break in and do a heist movie to fucking see any of it.
Yeah, they don't care about history. They never have. They more than likely never will. They pretend they do because they like to buy things and then sit on them, but they really don't. But I think a lot of that stuff will live, but a lot of traders, old tape traders, a lot of people who have files and stuff, a lot of this stuff lives on and won't go away, the stuff that's out there at least.